Hey everyone, long-time lurker, first-time poster. I never thought I'd be that guy coming to Reddit for advice, but here we are. I guess I just need to get this all out before I lose my mind. So, my name's Rick. I'm 52, recently retired from the army, spent most of my life in military intelligence, always overseas, always on the move. You get used to it after a while, you know? The deployments, the chaos, the constant need to stay sharp. But I won't lie, there was always this little thought in the back of my mind. One day, I'll come home, and things will be normal. Marcy and I will finally have our time together. Well, turns out, normal is a whole lot harder than I expected. Marcy and I have been married for 24 years. She's a nurse, always had a big heart, always wanted to help people. I thought she understood my job, understood me. We raised 2 great kids together, both out of the house now, doing their own thing. I figured this was finally our chance. No more missed anniversaries, no more Skype calls from halfway across the world. Just us, rediscovering each other. But man, something felt off almost immediately. At first, I chalked it up to the adjustment period. I mean, I'd been in for 3 decades. It's not like you flip a switch and suddenly you're civilian Rick. I tried to keep busy, went to the gym, took up some projects around the house. Marcy was supportive, at least on the surface, but I could tell she was distant. Always on her phone. Always texting. And when she'd laugh at something, it wasn't like before. She didn't share it with me like she used to. Then there were the late shifts. Yeah, I get it. Nursing can be unpredictable. But she was suddenly picking up a lot of extra hours. Coming home exhausted, barely speaking to me before heading straight to bed. And when I tried to reach out, to have real conversations, she just shut down. Then she told me about the medical mission. 6 weeks overseas, some volunteer thing with her hospital. I wanted to be supportive, I really did. But something about the way she said it, the way she rushed through the explanation, it didn't sit right. And when I casually asked who else was going, she hesitated. Then she said his name. Dr. Trey. A younger surgeon. Handsome, fit. I'd met him once at a hospital fundraiser a year ago. He was charming, confident, the kind of guy who knew exactly how good-looking he was. Marcy had mentioned him before in passing, always in that "oh he's so funny" way that women think is subtle. That's when the gut feeling hit me. The one that had saved my life countless times in the field. The one that screamed, "Rick, something isn't right here." But I didn't say anything. Not yet. Instead, I watched. I listened. And I waited. And sure enough, the pieces started coming together. So Marcy leaves for her 6-week medical mission. I give her a hug at the airport, tell her to be safe, and she promises to call when she lands. She doesn't. Alright, maybe she got busy. Long flight, jet lag, whatever. I wait. A full day passes. Nothing. I send a casual text. Hey, just checking in. Hope you got there safe. No reply. 12 hours later, I get a short, almost robotic response. Landed. Everything fine. Love you. That's when I knew. See, I spent my whole career analyzing people, watching how they talk, how they move, how they react under stress. When someone goes from writing you paragraphs to 1-sentence answers, that's a red flag. When they stop calling you by your usual pet name, that's a red flag. When your wife of 24 years suddenly stops acting like your wife, that's the biggest red flag of them all. Still, I tell myself to stay calm. Maybe I'm just paranoid. Maybe I've spent too many years in a world where deception was part of the job. But then came the excuses. I'd try to call, straight to voicemail. She'd text back hours later, "Sorry, long day. Exhausted." Or I'd ask about her schedule, and she'd be vague. "Hard to say, things change fast here." Then I noticed the pattern. Whenever I asked about Dr. Trey, she completely ignored the question. So I did what any man in my position would do. I started digging. I contacted a buddy of mine who still works in intelligence. Nothing illegal, nothing crazy, just a simple quiet look into her trip. He gets back to me a couple of days later and confirms what I was afraid to hear. Her team is in a safe location. No emergency situations. No sudden change in plans. And Marcy? She's not working nearly as many hours as she claimed. She has plenty of free time. I don't confront her yet. Instead, I test her. One night, I text her something sweet. Something that would normally make her respond instantly. Thinking about you tonight. Miss you like crazy. Can't wait for you to come home. 2 hours pass. Then 3. Then 6. At 3 a.m., she finally responds. Miss you too. That's it. That's when I knew without a doubt, my wife was cheating on me. Now, most guys would rage. Most guys would start firing off texts, demanding answers. But me? I'm not most guys. I've spent my whole life gathering intel, waiting for the right moment to strike. So I wait. Because if Marcy thinks she's playing me for a fool, she has no idea who she's dealing with. At this point, I knew. I didn't have proof, but proof wasn't necessary. The signs were all there, and I'd learned long ago to trust my instincts. But instincts don't hold up in court. And I wasn't about to make a move without being absolutely certain. So, I started playing the game. I acted normal. Sent casual texts. Didn't press too hard when she ignored my calls. If she was cheating, I wanted her to feel comfortable enough to slip up. Meanwhile, I got to work. First, I reached out to my lawyer, a damn good one. Not just any divorce lawyer, but a high-asset, high-conflict specialist. I wanted to know exactly where I stood if things went south. We went over our finances, assets, and liabilities. I made sure that if Marcy thought she was going to take me for a ride, she was sorely mistaken. Next, I quietly secured my accounts. Moved some money around. Set up contingencies. Nothing drastic, just enough to make sure that when the time came, I controlled the narrative. Then, I needed proof. I reached out to another buddy, someone with certain skills that you don't advertise on a resume. Let's call him Jake. Jake owed me a favor from back in the day, and he was more than happy to help. He dug into Marcy's digital footprint, nothing illegal, just a thorough comb-through of what was already out there. And what he found? Well, let's just say my wife wasn't as careful as she thought. First off, she had a second phone. A cheap burner, probably for personal conversations she didn't want me seeing. And guess what number she had been calling and texting nonstop? Yeah, Dr. Trey. Jake also found social media activity that didn't sit right. Marcy barely posted anything herself, but she was tagged in photos, ones she never mentioned to me. Like the one of her and Trey at a beachside bar, drinking cocktails, sitting way too close. Or the one of them in a marketplace, where he had his arm around her waist. Now tell me, what kind of married woman lets another man put his hands on her like that? I could feel the anger rising, but I swallowed it down. Emotions make you sloppy. Instead, I documented everything. Screenshots, logs, timestamps. I wanted an airtight case. Not just for the divorce, but for her humiliation. Because at this point, I wasn't just going to leave Marcy. I was going to destroy the fantasy world she thought she was living in. But first, I needed to hear it from her lips. So, I set a trap. I told her I was going on a last-minute fishing trip with an old army buddy for a few days. No cell service, completely off the grid. Just me, the wilderness, and a few cold beers. Of course, I never left town. I just wanted to see what she would do when she thought I wasn't watching. And folks? She fell for it. So, I left town. Told Marcy I'd be off the grid for a few days. No calls, no texts. Just me and the great outdoors. And wouldn't you know it? The second she thought I was gone, she got real comfortable. The first slip-up was small. She stopped being so careful with her replies. Instead of the usual short, vague texts, she sent me nothing at all. Not even a fake miss you or be safe. For a woman who used to get worried if I missed a call while deployed in a war zone, she suddenly had zero concern about my well-being. That was enough to confirm what I already knew. I didn't have a wife anymore. I had a woman who had already checked out of our marriage. But the second slip-up? That was the big one. Jake had eyes on her location, nothing illegal, just publicly available tracking. And guess where she went? Trey's hotel. Yeah. Turns out, he wasn't staying with the rest of the medical team. He had himself a private suite 2 miles away. And Marcy? She was there for hours. That's all I needed. Jake kept the logs. He pulled surveillance footage. I didn't even have to ask. He was already 2 steps ahead. By the time she texted me a lazy, "Hope you're having fun that night," I had a full timeline of her affair sitting in my inbox. So I replied. Having a great time. Miss you. Can't wait to see you soon. She had no idea what was coming. I could have confronted her right then. Could have let the anger take over and blown everything up in a single phone call. But I wasn't going to give her that. No. Marcy wanted to sneak around? She wanted to play games? Then I'd play too. But on my terms. So I let her think everything was fine. Let her think she was getting away with it. Meanwhile, I was setting the stage for the biggest wake-up call of her life. The day Marcy flew back, I was waiting at the airport, standing there like the perfect husband with a bouquet of flowers in my hand. She walked toward me, smiling like nothing had happened, like she wasn't sneaking around behind my back for the last 6 weeks. But I saw it, that flicker of guilt in her eyes before she forced the excitement. Rick. I missed you so much, she said, throwing her arms around me. I let her hug me. Let her play her part. My arms wrapped around her, steady, controlled. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I was in complete control, and that terrified her more than if I'd lost my temper right there. Missed you too, Marcy. How was the trip? She started rambling, talking about how exhausting it was, how much work they had, how rewarding but draining it had been. She talked and talked, filling the space with words, trying to steer the conversation as far away from Trey as possible. She didn't know I already had everything. The photos. The texts. The logs of her slipping into his hotel, night after night. She thought she was still ahead of me. But the second she turned the corner, she saw him, the process server standing there, manila envelope in hand. Marcy, he asked, voice calm, professional. I could feel her body tense beside me, like a deer in headlights. She blinked at the man, then at me. Yes. He extended the envelope. You've been served. Have a nice day. Her hand trembled as she took it, her face draining of color. Her mouth opened, closed, like she wanted to ask what was happening but couldn't get the words out. Rick, what is this? Her voice was already shaking. I leaned in close, just enough so she could hear me over the airport noise. You tell me, sweetheart. And then I walked away. I didn't need to stay and listen to her excuses. I didn't need to hear her stumble through whatever lie she had planned. I had already won. I didn't check my phone for hours after I walked away from Marcy at the airport. I knew what was coming. Calls, texts, desperation. But I wasn't in a hurry. I went home, made myself a strong drink, and sat on the back porch, watching the sun go down like it was any other evening. Because for me it was. For Marcy? Her world was about to collapse. When I finally checked my phone, there it was. 14 missed calls. 7 voicemails. A dozen frantic texts. The first few were confused. Marcy, Rick, what is this? I don't understand. Call me. Marcy, Rick, please, this has to be a mistake. Let's talk. Then came the gaslighting. Marcy, if this is about us being distant, I told you, it's just stress from work. I don't know why you're doing this. Marcy, I love you. I have never done anything to hurt you. And finally, the panic. Marcy, Rick, please, I'm begging you, just talk to me. Marcy, you can't just throw away 24 years like this. This isn't fair. Marcy, I'm coming home. We need to fix this. I set my phone down. Took another sip of my drink. I had expected all of this. The denial, the blame shifting, the attempts to manipulate. Marcy was doing exactly what cheaters always do, pretending that if they act confused enough, the truth might somehow change. But I wasn't playing that game. An hour later, I heard the garage door open. Right on schedule. She must have driven home straight from the airport, barely giving herself time to breathe. I didn't move. Just sat there on the porch, waiting. She stepped outside, her suitcase still in the hallway, her face pale and drawn. She looked at me, searching my expression for any sign of weakness. Any sign that she could still talk her way out of this. Rick, please, she started, her voice soft, practiced. I didn't respond. She swallowed hard, took a shaky breath, and sat down across from me. She stared at the ground, probably rehearsing the speech she had planned for this exact moment. This can't be real, she said. You served me divorce papers? Just like that? Without even talking to me. That made me laugh. Just a small, humorless chuckle. Without talking to you? I repeated. You mean the way you didn't talk to me for 6 weeks? The way you ignored my calls? The way you let another man put his hands on you? Her face crumpled. Rick, no, it's not like that. I cut her off. I know about Trey. I know about the hotel. I know everything, Marcy. Dead silence. She blinked, opened her mouth, closed it again. Caught. That's the thing about cheaters. They're never ready for the moment they realize the lie is over. She had spent weeks crafting her excuses, planning how she would spin this if I ever got suspicious. But nothing prepares them for when the person they betrayed already knows the truth. It wasn't. I didn't mean for it to happen, she finally whispered. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. Don't do that. Don't insult me by acting like it just happened. You made a choice, Marcy. Repeatedly. She broke then. The tears came, the shaking hands, the gasping breaths. But I didn't move. Didn't comfort her. She had no right to my sympathy. I was lonely, she sobbed. You were gone for so long, and I felt like I was losing you. Trey was he made me feel wanted again. But it didn't mean anything. I swear to God, Rick, it wasn't serious. I stared at her. Cold. Unmoved. Then why did you lie? I asked. Why hide it? Why sneak around? She had no answer. Just more tears. I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. You threw away 24 years, Marcy. Not me. You. She reached for my hand then, desperate, pleading. Rick, please. We can get through this. We always have. I stood up. Not this time. And then I walked inside, leaving her sobbing in the dark. Marcy stayed outside for a long time after I walked inside. I could hear her pacing back and forth on the porch, crying, muttering to herself. Maybe she thought I'd come back out, that I'd soften, that I'd let her pull me into some long emotional conversation where she could twist things into her favor. She didn't realize I was past that. Eventually, she came in, wiping her face, trying to compose herself. I was in the kitchen, pouring myself another drink, when she walked up behind me. So that's it, she asked, voice hoarse from crying. You're just done. I didn't even turn around. I was done the second you chose him over me. Silence. Then, I never chose him over you. That actually made me laugh. I turned to face her, leaning against the counter. Marcy, you had 6 weeks to choose me. 6 weeks to answer my calls. 6 weeks to tell me the truth. But you didn't. You lied. And when you weren't lying, you ignored me. And now you're standing here, acting shocked that I won't just sweep this under the rug? What exactly did you think was going to happen? She bit her lip, her hands shaking at her sides. I could see the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out what angle to take next. Rick, I love you, she said, voice soft. I made a mistake, but we can work through this. We have to. No, we don't, I said bluntly. That's the thing. I don't have to do anything. You made your bed, Marcy. Now you get to lie in it. And that's when the real Marcy came out. The moment she realized the crying, the pleading, the guilt-tripping wasn't working, her face changed. The softness drained out of her eyes, replaced by something colder, sharper. Oh, I see, she said bitterly. This isn't about what I did. This is about your pride. Mr. Army Intelligence can't stand the thought of his wife making a mistake, so instead of being a man and fixing things, you'd rather burn it all down. There it was. The blame shifting. My pride. I repeated, chuckling. You're the one who spent 6 weeks in another man's bed, and now it's my fault? That's cute, Marcy. Real cute. She folded her arms, her jaw tight. And what about you, huh? You were gone for decades, Rick. You think I don't know about Deidre? Ah, there it was. The counterattack. Deidre was a CIA agent I worked with years ago. She and I had a good working relationship, maybe even a little flirtation, but that was it. Marcy always had this idea in her head that something had happened between us, despite the fact that I had never once given her a reason to believe it. Are you seriously trying to compare my working with a woman to you having an actual affair? I asked. She scoffed. Oh, please. You expect me to believe nothing ever happened between you two? All those nights overseas, all those missions? Come on, Rick. You were probably doing the same thing I did. I just had the guts to admit it. I shook my head, disgusted. This was her out. This was the excuse she had been waiting for, the thing she could latch onto to justify what she did. If she could convince herself that I had cheated first, then suddenly, her betrayal wouldn't seem so bad. I never cheated on you, Marcy, I said flatly. Not once. But I can see now that you've been waiting for an excuse to do it yourself. And the second you found one, you didn't hesitate. She threw her hands up. Oh my God, Rick. People make mistakes. People get weak. I was lonely. You were selfish, I cut in. You were selfish, and now you don't want to deal with the consequences. She glared at me, her face red with frustration. The guilt was gone now. The regret was gone. Now, it was just anger. Fine, she spat. If you want to throw away everything we built over a stupid mistake, go ahead. But don't sit here and act like you're some perfect husband. You weren't. You never were. I just nodded. You keep telling yourself that, Marcy. Maybe one day you'll believe it. And then I walked upstairs, leaving her standing there alone in the kitchen. Let her be angry. Let her scream, cry, break things if she wanted to. It didn't matter anymore. Because I was done. Marcy didn't sleep in our bedroom that night. I don't know if she stayed downstairs, in the guest room, or just sat in the dark stewing in her own mess. I didn't care. I locked the bedroom door behind me, not because I thought she'd try anything, but because I didn't want to hear her excuses anymore. By morning, the house was quiet. I got up, showered, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table like it was any other day. Marcy walked in a few minutes later, looking like she hadn't slept a minute. Her eyes were puffy, her hair was a mess, and she had this tight, panicked expression, like she'd spent all night trying to come up with a way out and realized she didn't have one. I barely acknowledged her. Just sipped my coffee, scrolling through my phone. Rick, she said, voice hoarse. I didn't look up. Morning. She swallowed hard. We need to talk. I took another sip. We talked last night. No, you talked. You made up your mind and shut me out. We need to really talk. I set my mug down and finally looked at her. Marcy, there's nothing left to talk about. You cheated. I know you cheated. The divorce is happening. That's it. Her face twisted like she wanted to argue, but instead, she pulled out a chair and sat across from me. I don't want a divorce, she said, voice shaking. I know I messed up, but I want to fix this. I want us to fix this. I sighed, rubbing my temples. Marcy. No. You're not even willing to try, she asked, her voice rising. No. She let out a bitter laugh. Wow. Just like that. You're gonna throw away everything we built. I leaned forward, leveling her with a stare. No, Marcy. You threw it away. The second you crawled into Trey's bed, you set our marriage on fire. Now you're mad that I won't stand here and burn with you. Her lip trembled, and for a second, I thought she might start crying again. But then, just like the night before, her frustration boiled over. You're so damn cold, Rick. Is this what all those years in the army turned you into? Some unfeeling machine who just cuts people out of his life the second they make a mistake. I smiled, because that was exactly what she wanted me to do. Lose my temper, react, engage. Nice try, I said. But no. This isn't about me being cold. This is about me finally seeing you for what you really are. She slammed her hands on the table. I made a mistake, she shouted. I stayed calm. Unshaken. No, Marcy. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. A mistake is burning dinner. What you did was a choice. Over and over again, you chose to betray me. She clenched her jaw, her nails digging into the table. She knew she was cornered. So what now, she muttered, barely keeping it together. Now, I said, we get divorced. You get to explain to the kids why you blew up our family. You get to explain to your friends why you're suddenly single. And you get to live with the fact that you destroyed the one person who actually loved you. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Good. You're really gonna do this to me, she whispered. I tilted my head. Funny. I was about to ask you the same thing. She had no comeback. No more excuses. Because she knew I had already won. Marcy sat there, staring at me like she couldn't believe what was happening. Like I was the one doing this to her. She looked hollow. Like she finally understood just how deep she'd screwed up. Rick. She started again, softer this time. We can get through this. We have to. We've been together too long to just throw it all away. I shook my head, amused. You keep saying we, Marcy. But there's no we anymore. There's just you. You made sure of that. She exhaled sharply, pushing her hands through her hair. You don't get it, do you? Trey didn't mean anything. It was just a distraction. I was lonely, and he was there, but it wasn't real. Oh, so you ruined our marriage over a fling? Great. That makes it so much better, I said, shaking my head. Her fingers curled into fists. She wanted to fight. She wanted me to lash out, to give her something she could work with. I didn't. She started, but I cut her off. Marcy, I don't care. She blinked, thrown off. You keep trying to make me care, to make me argue, to make me feel sorry for you. I don't. You made your bed. Now you get to lie in it. Her breath hitched, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. Not just guilt. Not just regret. Fear. Because she finally understood. This wasn't some temporary fight. This wasn't a bump in the road. This was the end. I stood up, grabbing my coffee mug. I already talked to my lawyer. You'll be getting everything finalized soon. I suggest you start figuring out where you're gonna live. Her head snapped up. What? You're moving out, I said simply. She pushed back from the table so fast her chair scraped against the floor. This is my house too. Not for long. Her mouth opened, then shut. She wasn't prepared for this. She thought we'd argue, that we'd drag this out, that there'd be months of back and forth, maybe even a chance for her to weasel her way back in. She had no idea that I had already taken steps to make sure she was gone. I need time, Rick, she said, her voice shaking. I can't just pack up and leave. You have a week, I said, calm as ever. A week? Are you kidding me? Where am I supposed to go? I shrugged. Maybe Trey has a spare room. Her face crumpled. Rick, don't do this. I sighed, stepping past her. You did this, Marcy. I'm just making sure you deal with the consequences. And just like that, I walked away. She had lost. And for the first time, she knew it. Marcy didn't take the news well. For the next few days, she swung between denial, anger, and desperation. One moment, she'd be begging me to reconsider, swearing we could rebuild what we had. The next, she'd be furious, accusing me of overreacting, blaming me for giving up too easily. I didn't engage. I didn't argue. I didn't care. I went about my life as if she was already gone. I slept fine. Ate fine. Went to the gym. Had lunch with an old army buddy. While she spiraled, I moved on. And that drove her insane. 2 days before she was set to leave, she finally broke. I was in the living room, watching TV, when she stormed in. Her face was red, eyes wild, like she'd been building up to this moment all day. You're really gonna do this, she said, voice trembling. You're really just gonna throw me away like I'm nothing? I muted the TV and turned to her, calm as ever. You weren't nothing until you made yourself nothing to me. She let out a bitter laugh. God, you're so damn cold, Rick. Do you even feel anything? Or are you just enjoying punishing me? I leaned forward, resting my arms on my knees. You think this is punishment? Marcy, I haven't even gotten started. You should be grateful I'm handling this the way I am. Her mouth snapped shut. She knew exactly what I meant. I could have ruined her publicly. Could have sent the pictures and messages to our kids, our friends, her coworkers. I could have torched her reputation. But I didn't. Not because I cared about her, but because she wasn't worth the effort. She swallowed hard. And Trey, she asked. What happens to him? I smirked. Oh, he's already gotten what he deserves. Her face paled. Rick, what did you do? I didn't answer. Just let her sit with that uncertainty. The truth? I didn't personally touch Trey. But I didn't have to. A man like him, cocky, careless, disrespecting another man's wife? It was only a matter of time before someone put him in his place. And they did. I had heard through the grapevine that Trey had a little accident. A few bruised ribs. A busted lip. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to send a message. Marcy must have put 2 and 2 together because she suddenly looked sick. "Jesus, Rick," she whispered. "I never wanted this." I let out a short laugh. "No, Marcy. You never wanted to face the consequences. But here we are." She stood there for a long moment, looking at me like she didn't recognize me. Maybe she didn't. Maybe in her mind, I was still supposed to be the forgiving, patient husband who would always fight for her, no matter what she did. But that man was dead. She wiped at her face, her breath shaky. "I really lost you, didn't I?" I nodded. "A long time ago." She nodded back, then turned and walked upstairs. That was the last real conversation we had. 2 days later, she packed her things and left. And when that front door shut behind her, I felt nothing but relief. The morning after Marcy left, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in years. No tension in my chest. No waiting for the next excuse, the next lie, the next performance. Just silence. Peace. Freedom. I made my coffee, sat on the porch, and for the first time in a long time, I thought about my future. Not our future. Mine. Marcy had been my world for 24 years. Everything I did with her in mind. Every decision I made as a husband. But now? Now I was just Rick. And I liked that. But Marcy wasn't done. I knew she'd reach out eventually. Cheaters don't like to be the villains in their own stories. They rewrite events, twist things around in their heads to make themselves the victims. So I wasn't surprised when, a week later, I got a text from her. "Marcy, hey. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time. I could already picture the conversation. More apologies, more half-truths, more attempts to explain why she destroyed everything. I had no interest in hearing it. So I left her on read. That should have been the end of it. But cheaters don't just go away. A few days later, I got another text. "Marcy, I think about you every day. I miss you. I know you don't believe me, but I do." Then another. "Marcy, please, Rick. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I just want to talk. One last time." And then one night, she showed up at the house. I was in the living room, watching a documentary, when I heard a soft knock on the front door. I knew it was her before I even checked. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. Just letting her stand out there and stew in her own choices. But then I figured, why not give her what she wants? So I opened the door. And there she was. She looked like hell. Hair a mess, eyes red, face thinner than before. She was holding a small box, something personal, maybe something sentimental. "Rick," she breathed out, like she was relieved to see me. "What do you want, Marcy?" I asked, my voice flat. She hesitated, gripping the box tighter. I needed to see you." I leaned against the doorframe. "You've seen me. Now what?" Her lip trembled. "Can we talk?" "Talk about what?" "About how you cheated on me. About how you threw away our marriage. About how you expected me to just sit there and accept it." She flinched. "No, Rick, I don't know how to move on." I laughed. A genuine, deep laugh. "That's not my problem, Marcy." Her face twisted in pain. "I know I hurt you. I know I destroyed everything. But I don't know how to stop missing you." I stared at her for a long moment. And then I said the words that ended it all. "I stopped missing you the second you picked Trey over me." She sucked in a breath, her eyes filling with fresh tears. I took a step back and nodded toward her car. "Go home, Marcy. Whatever that means for you now." And then for the final time, I shut the door in her face. This time, she didn't knock again. She just left. And I never looked back. After that night, I figured I'd heard the last of Marcy. She got her final words in, I shut the door on her, and that should have been the end of it. But cheaters? They don't just disappear. They crumble. They spiral. They self-destruct. And Marcy? She was no exception. It started with the calls from mutual friends. "Hey man, I ran into Marcy the other day. She's not doing great. She's been asking about you. Keeps saying she made a mistake. She looks like hell, Rick. She's drinking a lot. She's not herself. I didn't respond to any of it. Not my problem. Then came the texts from our kids. Our son Jake, 23, had taken the news pretty well. He was always more like me, quiet, observant, sharp. He saw right through Marcy's excuses from the start. Our daughter, Lauren, 26, was more emotional. She loved her mother, and while she was furious about what happened, she struggled with the idea of cutting her off completely. One night, Lauren called me. "Dad, Mom's not okay." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. "What now?" "She's a mess. She called me drunk last night, crying about how she ruined everything. She said she misses you, that she doesn't know how to fix her life." "That's not my concern, Lauren." "I know, but she's my mom. I don't know what to do." I softened a little. I hated that Marcy was dragging our daughter into this. Typical cheater behavior: destroy everything, then look for sympathy. "Just remind her that this is what she chose," I said. "She had a husband, a family, a life. She threw it away for a fling. Now she has to live with that." Lauren sniffled. "I don't think she thought you'd actually leave." That made me chuckle. "That's her problem, not mine." Lauren didn't argue. She just sighed. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart." And that was that. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get funnier, I got a call from an unexpected source. Trey's wife. Yep. Turns out, the good doctor had a wife back home, one he apparently thought was too stupid to notice his affair. But unlike Marcy, Trey's wife didn't just sit around and cry about it. She wrecked him. She drained their joint accounts, took their house, exposed his cheating to the entire hospital. Word got out, and suddenly, Trey wasn't the golden boy surgeon anymore. Patients didn't trust him. Colleagues avoided him. His reputation tanked. And then? He got his ass handed to him. I don't know who did it. I didn't ask. But someone, maybe a husband, maybe a brother, maybe just karma itself, beat him down. Bad. Broken ribs, busted lip, a black eye that made him unrecognizable. Marcy must have heard about it, because a few days later, I got one last desperate text from her. "Marcy, I don't know if you care, but Trey's in the hospital. It's really bad. I don't know what to do." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back. "Me, not my problem. Maybe he should have kept his hands off married women." And then? I blocked her number. For good. Blocking Marcy should have been the final chapter. I was done, I had moved on, and I thought that was the last I'd hear from her. But I underestimated just how much some people refuse to accept the consequences of their own actions. It wasn't long before mutual friends started reaching out again, each with a new Marcy disaster to report. "Rick, have you heard? Marcy lost her job. She's been staying at a friend's house, but it's not going well. Man, she tried to go back to the hospital, but nobody respects her anymore. Apparently, some of the younger nurses call her Dr. Trey's side piece behind her back." I didn't respond to any of it. Not my problem. Then one day, I got an unexpected visit. It was Vincent, our neighbor. Or rather, Marcy's biggest enabler. Vincent and his wife Leslie had been hinting at their open relationship for years, always trying to push Marcy and me into their weird little world. I had always shut it down, but now that I thought about it, I wondered just how much they had played a role in Marcy's downfall. Vincent stood on my porch, looking awkward. "Hey Rick. Can we talk?" I crossed my arms. "Make it quick." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look man, I just wanted to say. I had no idea things would turn out like this. Leslie and we never meant for Marcy to go off the deep end. We thought she was just, exploring things. We didn't think she'd throw away her whole life." I stared at him for a long moment. Then I laughed. "You and Leslie encouraged her to cheat, and now you're acting surprised she ruined her marriage?" Vincent had the nerve to look offended. "We never told her to cheat. We just—" I cut him off. "Save it, Vincent. You and Leslie are exactly the kind of people who drag others into your mess because you're too selfish to deal with your own issues. Marcy was weak, and you fed into it. That's on her. And on you." He shifted uncomfortably. "Yeah, well, for what it's worth, she regrets it." I smirked. "Oh, I'm sure she does. But regrets don't undo actions, do they? Vincent had no response. He just mumbled something about hoping things got better and left. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, but I knew exactly who it was from. I almost tossed it in the trash, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. Rick. I don't know if you'll even read this, but I have to try. I've lost everything. My marriage, my job, my reputation. My friends barely talk to me. The kids won't even answer my calls. I never meant for any of this to happen. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know why I was so selfish. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect you to ever speak to me again. But I just need you to know that I would give anything to go back and undo it all. I would give anything to be your wife again. I miss you. Every single day. I hope you're happy, Rick. I really do. Even if it kills me that I'm not the one beside you anymore. Marcy. I sat there for a moment, staring at the paper. And then I folded it neatly, walked over to the trash can, and dropped it in. Because that's exactly where Marcy and her regret belonged. After I tossed Marcy's letter in the trash, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no lingering emotions. Just closure. She was gone. For good. The weeks that followed were quiet. Peaceful. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells, wasn't questioning my wife's loyalty, wasn't dealing with the weight of someone else's selfishness. I was finally free. Jake and Lauren stayed in touch, checking in on me more than usual. I could tell they were still working through their own feelings about what their mother had done, but I never pushed them. That was their journey to take. One night, Lauren called me. "Dad, do you ever think you'll get married again?" I chuckled, swirling the whiskey in my glass. "I don't know, sweetheart. I think I'm enjoying life too much right now." She laughed. "I figured. But I do want you to be happy." "I already am," I said. And I meant it. I ran into Marcy one last time. Not planned, not dramatic, just life playing one final hand. It was a random Saturday. I was at a coffee shop downtown, waiting for my order, when I heard someone call my name. I turned. And there she was. She looked small, thinner, tired, like someone who had lost everything and was still falling. For a brief second, I felt a flicker of something. Not love. Not sympathy. Just recognition. Like looking at an old photograph of a life that didn't belong to me anymore. "Hi, Rick," she said softly. I nodded. "Marcy." She hesitated. I could tell she wanted to say more, maybe apologize again, maybe try to find some thread of connection still left between us. But I didn't give her the chance. My coffee was ready. I grabbed it, gave her a final nod, and walked out the door. No words. No closure conversation. Because I didn't need one. Marcy was my past. And I was too busy enjoying my future.